So adding seeds to a home-baked loaf not only boosts its nutritional value, but it also improves the flavour, the texture of the crumb. So today we're going to use some sunflower seeds and some pumpkin seeds, and we're going to use an overnight sponge, and this is going to improve the overall flavour of our dough. Right, so first up we'll put the ferment together. Now ideally I do this the night before. I make mine up about 10 o'clock in the evening and it's ready to go the next morning. Now we're going to need 250 grams of pre-ferment for our main dough, but I'm going to make up 300 grams just to make sure, and you'll see why a little bit later. Now add 150 grams of water, 3 grams of dried yeast and 150 grams of strong bread flour to your container and mix it well and pop a lid on it. Now make sure the container is big enough to allow for that mixture to expand a lot. I'm talking like 4 or 5 times. Now, as a reference, my kitchen is currently 32 degrees Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's time to make up the main dough. Now, this is exactly the same pre-ferment as I've just shown you how to make, and you can see how it's gone through its fermentation, expanding, and now it's dropped back down. It smells acidic, a little bit fruity, and generally alcoholic. Add 190 grams of water to a large mixing bowl, followed by 250 grams of the pre-ferment. Now remember, this was 300 grams when I mixed it last night, and I can only just scrape 250 grams out of the bowl. Go figure that one. And that's why I always make up a touch more than I need. After a quick stir, I'm going to add 20 grams of barley malt extract, 20 grams of olive oil, 295 grams of strong bread flour. Now, as ever, mine's got a protein content of 13%. And lastly, in goes 12 grams of salt. Bring everything together roughly with a spoon. Now, this dough is quite wet in the beginning of the process, and this is deliberate, as the seeds that we're going to add shortly are dry and they're going to absorb some of that water out of the dough. You'll see how much more manageable the dough is later in the process. We're going to cover this, we're going to leave it out on the worktop at room temperature. Now after 20 minutes, turn the dough out, but don't use any bench flour at all. Now this dough is sticky, so if you've got a bowl mixer and you'd rather use it, then you can, but I'd suggest using your hand. You'll soon get used to working with wetter doughs. It's just a case of getting used to that dough sticking to your digits. Now when I'm handling higher hydration doughs, I prefer to pick the dough mass up off of the bench when I need. Now there's a couple of ways of doing this, but I like to pick the dough mass up, throw the dough forward and downwards towards the bench so it sticks. Then I open out the dough that's between my hands and fold it over the top of the dough that's stuck to the bench. This is great for building the gluten structure, but you also get great feedback from the dough. You can feel it coming together and becoming more manageable. The stickiness really helps with this technique. It would be impossible if you used bench flour. Now from time to time you can use your bench scraper just to bring everything back together and have a general clear up. Okay, so I've been working this dough for about 10 minutes and it feels stronger. It's still sticky, but definitely stronger. So now I'm going to add in 80 grams of seeds. I'm using 40 grams of pumpkin seeds and 40 grams of sunflower seeds. Continue to work the dough and make sure the seeds are well distributed. As you do this, you can feel the dough becoming more manageable. Make sure you do this for a couple of minutes just to make sure there's no pockets of seeds that are kind of clumped together. Now using a bench scraper, bring the dough into a ball. We're going to pop that back into our bowl, cover it, and we're going to leave it out at room temperature to proof. Right, so the dough took 2 hours to proof in my kitchen at my temperature. Now it's really well proofed, it's full of gas, but it still feels strong. And although the seeds have hydrated a little, the dough is still sticky, so you can use a little bit of bench flour here. So we're going to pull the dough out into a square shape, and here's a little tip. If the dough's sticking to the work surface, just sprinkle a little bit of flour next to the edges of the dough and then use your bench scraper to kind of fire the flour underneath and release the dough at the same time. Fold one side of the dough over the center third and then repeat with the other. You can then roll the dough up onto itself. We're going to cover this with a bowl and just leave it to rest for 7 or 8 minutes on the bench. That little rest has helped the dough relax and it's ready for shaping. Now, remember this is quite a wet dough, so make sure you flour your basket or your cloth really well. Now we can flip that dough out, making sure that the coiled sides of the dough are facing towards us and away from us. Roll the dough up into a sausage shape, tucking the ends in just to keep things nice and neat. And when you get to the end, make sure the dough isn't sticking to the bench. Tidy it up and then just pinch that seam closed. Now this is about an 850 gram piece of dough. Now you can either prove this in a big basket, you could divide it into two and prove them in smaller baskets, or you could prove it in a large bowl with a kitchen cloth. And I'll link to a video which will show you how to do that in the card above, in the description, and probably at the end of the video. Now once the dough is proved, you can dust the top with flour. Again, the dough feels nicely gassed, but it still feels strong. It doesn't feel like it's about to collapse. If your dough feels delicate at this stage, then it's probable that you've over-proved it. Now I'll leave the bake settings and the temperatures up on the screen at the end of the video so you can screenshot them, and I'll pop the ingredients up there too. But this is going to bake on a baking stone that's been preheated in an oven to 220 degrees Celsius or 430 degrees Fahrenheit. It's going to bake 20 minutes covered with a pan that's been sprayed with water on the inside, and then it's going to bake for a further 20 minutes uncovered. So our loaves had 40 minutes baking, and you can see why I chose not to score the dough. The basket cloth gives a really nice pattern on this bread, and I think it looks nice to let that bread crack open naturally. It seems to really suit this loaf. The steam that was generated from spraying the inside of the pan with that water during the first 20-minute bake has helped produce a thin, crackly crust, but the crumb on the inside is really nice and soft. It's an extremely light loaf for a seeded bread. I can't see this loaf lasting long today with my tribe. So that's it for today, guys. Check out my playlist or the video suggestion at the end of this video. A huge thank you for watching. I'll see you again very soon. Stay tuned.
Wasted